Reverse by Black K. Cat. Chapter 65. Numinous. Not really the best place to hide, kid.
She shrieks loud enough to make Kurama wince and tries to scramble out of the nook between two trees where he's managed to wedge himself. Before he can bolt and give Kurama away, though, Kurama catches him by the arm and tugs him back into the shadows with a roll of his eyes.
Sage, you'd think I was murdering you. Shut up and sit down.
Shisui glares at him, clutching his wrist to his chest like Kurama broke it.
You! Can't you make noise when you move?
Damn it, are you trying to kill me?
Shisui, Tenzo says reprovingly, stepping out of the tree behind him, and Shisui yelps, practically throwing himself behind Kurama in a blur.
Tenzo stops, blinking at the wheezing Uchiha as he clutches dramatically at his chest, and then shares a look with Kurama. Instead of commenting, he asks,
I thought all the Jinchuriki were playing tag. Aren't you, Kurama?
With a glance back down into the square to make sure everyone's fine, Kurama nods, then drops to sit cross-legged on the edge of the building, a fall of branches mostly hiding him from view. He's not too concerned about the kids finding him as long as Shisui contains himself. Fu is chasing Utakata, and Yugito and Karin are skulking around the edges of the square below, probably waiting for Jonin to ambush. Roshi and Han are sharing a companionable bottle of sake seated on a slightly scorched wall off to one side while they keep one eye out for Fu. Kurama's pretty sure he saw Naruto and Gaara hunkered down in someone's garden a short ways away too. The fact that they're congregating will make the next part of this easier, and it keeps Kurama from having to round them all up individually. He's definitely in favor.
I played, he says with a shrug. This is for them though.
Tenzo comes to join him, also carefully out of sight and a bit more thoroughly hidden than Kurama, as he pulls Fuji's star ball out of his pocket and dark eyes study the glass orb curiously, though he doesn't ask. Shisui apparently recovered from his frights, has no such qualms, however, and he throws himself down to lean against Tenzo's leg and immediately questions, "Was that supposed to be?" Kurama raises a brow at him, glancing up, and it takes effort not to tense when he sees Shisui's eyes have spun to red and black as he studies the charm. Those eyes especially, and Kurama growls before he can quite help it. "Eyes away!" he snaps. "No!" Shisui retorts, just as sharp, and it's enough to draw Kurama up short. He blinks at the teenager, only to find Shisui glaring right back. The sight of the Sharingan is enough to raise all the hairs on Kurama's neck, and he bares his teeth, but Shisui doesn't waver. "No!" he repeats. "Look, I get that you don't like the Sharingan, and I know that as a concept, Koto Matsukame is horrifying, but this is who I am! My best friend died in the Third War, and she's the reason I have these eyes. I'm not going to pretend I don't have them to make you feel better." Kurama narrows his eyes, studying the kid. Shisui is tense, like he's ready to bolt, and Kurama can see how his breath is quick and slightly unsteady. He's scared, but it means enough to him that he's standing up to Kurama anyway. Like Naruto, Kurama thinks, or Sasuke, even Iruka in the darkness of the future, and that kind of thing. Well, he might not like the Sharingan, might hate it regardless of who bears it, but Shisui's alright, he supposes. "You know anything about Kitsune?" he asks instead of acknowledging the statement, and though Shisui gives him a wary look, he agreeably lets the previous topic drop. "Only what that black fox said in Moon Country. No Kitsune are rogue foxes, and Myobu are the summons. Oh, and tails are a sign of status, not like hair color." That's so close to wrong that Kurama has to roll his eyes. "Not quite. No Kitsune are just foxes who haven't sworn themselves to something, and Myobu have. Some Myobu are summons, but not all of them. Some no Kitsune cause trouble, but most of them just want to be left alone." There's an interested noise from Tenzo, who leans in slightly to see what Kurama's etching into the glass, and Kurama shifts a bit so it's more visible. Both kind of Kitsune gain tails as they gain chakra though. Enough power and they can choose to put it into a star ball. Makes the chakra more accessible, but there's the risk that someone could steal the star ball and leave the Kitsune to die without it. That's where the wish thing comes from? Shisui says in realization, tipping his head as his eyes narrow thoughtfully. "You're supposed to be able to get a wish if you take something precious to a fox." Kurama snorts, mostly at the thought of a human managing to steal a star ball and then keep it for any length of time. Yeah, that's it.
Take a kitsune's chakra and they'd do whatever you wanted to get it back. Though they'd probably make sure you have a nasty accident right afterwards. This is a stall ball then.
Tenzo brushes his hair back, squinting at the seals.
Those are for containment, aren't they? You're going to put chakra into it.
Lifting the glass up to the light, Kurama checks his seals one more time, then calls up his chakra. Negative and positive swirl into a tight vortex at the tip of his finger, and Kurama touches the Bijudama to the glass, holding his breath.
It doesn't explode or discharge the way he was half expecting, though.
With a shiver of air and a ringing chime, high and sweet, the Bijudama winks out and reforms inside the sphere, spinning like a trapped galaxy of violet and black.
Okay, now that was really cool! Shisui says in awe, leaning in until the tip of his nose is almost touching the glass. That's so much chakra! Like it's looking at the sun! How can it just stay there? Can I have one? No, Kurama says firmly. He eyes the star ball for a moment, but it's still not exploding and the seals are holding steady, so he drops it back into the pocket of his Hayori. Fuji's probably around here somewhere. She and Momiji have been exploring the village practically since they arrived, and they seem to be having fun. Kurama's certain they're getting a kick out of the game of tag. I promised this one to Fuji for helping me for so long. Make one of your own. Shisui huffs, crossing his arms over his chest with an expression suspiciously like a pout. Oh, come on! I can't make those spinny things, so that's not fair! Life's not fair, Kurama tells him dryly. You'll recover. Tenzo snores, hiding his grin behind one hand when Shisui glares at him. I thought I saw Fuji earlier, he says. Though I was slightly distracted at the time. Kakashi-senpai came flying past like there was a demon right behind him. I haven't seen him move that fast in years.
Ah, yes. The fabulous disappearing wonder.
Bastard. Kurama mutters automatically, though he can't exactly say he was surprised when Kakashi bolted. Emotionally stable and in touch with his feelings, the man is not. When he glances up, though, two pairs of dark eyes are fixed on him, both with varying levels of accusation. What? He demands grouchily. It's slightly possible the word comes out more defensively than he'd intended. You know why the captain was running, Shisui says suspiciously. You didn't threaten to eat him or something, did you? We haven't gotten that far yet, Kurama almost says, but he's pretty sure Shisui wouldn't take it the way Kurama intends it. Instead, he huffs and snaps. If me threatening to eat Kakashi made him bolt, he'd have done it weeks ago. That's true, Tenzo says judiciously, though he's still watching Kurama carefully. But something happened, didn't it? They're not going to drop this, Kurama judges with an exasperated sigh. Both of them are stubborn, and it's clear they care about Kakashi. I kissed him, he says flatly. There's a long moment of silence as Shisui and Tenzo both digest that. Okay, Shisui allows. Of all the things I was expecting, that wasn't one of them! Tenzo's sound of agreement is faintly confused. So, Kakashi-senpai didn't like it? He asks cautiously. Shisui pulls a face. Okay, you know what? No, we should definitely change the subject. Well, since his tongue was in my mouth, I don't really think he objected, Kurama says dryly, ignoring Shisui's flailing. Drop it, kid. I'll go find him when he's had a chance to think things through. Tenzo is quiet for another moment, then smiles a little. You know how he works, he says, and it's a bit warmer than normal. I'm glad. Just be careful. Or, Shisui adds with a grimace, we're going to be forced to try and kill you in the name of defending the captain's honor? And I don't want to die a virgin, okay? One eyebrow rising, Kurama watches color flood Tenzo's cheeks, though Shisui is busy making faces and doesn't seem to notice. Right. Well, I think you've probably got options there, he says, and Tenzo gives him a look like a deer frozen in the path of a Bijudama. Kurama just smirks back, but takes something like pity on the kid and finishes, I'm pretty sure there have to be some people in the village who still think you're cool. Maybe if they've been living under a rock. Slander! Shisui protests. You are maligning my good name, okay? I am very cool. I am the coolest, right, Tenzo? Thankfully for Kurama's sanity, a loud screech cuts Tenzo off before he can respond.
Kurama glances down at the square in time to see his Zen duck as Yukito goes flying over his head, dodging her claws. He's not nearly as lucky with Utakata's ooze, though, which splatters across his robes with a loud squelch. Yagura, on his left, neatly sidesteps the other Kirinin as he sprints past, though that leaves A directly in the line of fire as Fu dumps a large amount of scale powder on the Kage and village heads. Oh no! Shisui says softly, but with feeling. Wide, horrified eyes fixed on the scene below. Really, Kurama couldn't have planned this better if he tried! As the burst of light clears, Onoki leaps back, wiping furiously at his eyes and steps, "You little hooligans, I'm going to—" A burst of molten rock just avoids taking his head off. "Oops," Roshi says very loudly and very insincerely, twisting to miss the Chukage as he follows Itakata. "Sorry, watch your step coming through." "Hi!" A roars, straightening to his full height as he sheds scale powder everywhere. Whatever he intends to follow up with, though, he doesn't get the chance. Karin gives a war cry as Han goes barreling past with her on his shoulders, and a burst of water all but knocks the Rikage off his feet. To be fair, Kurama thinks the jutsu was probably directed at Gaara, who's a few yards behind them with Naruto nowhere to be seen. But Kushina is still teaching Karin the basics, and her aim is sketchy. Sarutobi, at the rear of the group of Kage, with a tiny head woman beside him, puts a hand over his eyes like he's contemplating the sweet release of death. And Kurama can't help but grin a little vindictively. The old coot might have been close to his Naruto, might be close to this Naruto, but he's definitely not free of fault in letting Naruto grow up alone. Could even be considered the cause of it. Holding grudges is something Kurama's still pretty good at. "How nice of them to all stand in a group like that," Kurama says dryly. "It's like bowling or something." "Please don't say that," Shisui says weakly. He's peeking from between his fingers as if a narrower view will reduce the horror of seeing a bunch of Cherokee accidentally on purpose attack the village leaders. "I'm pretty sure this is how wars start, and I've already lived through one. Okay, that's more than enough!" "If anyone wants to start a war, I'll end it," Kurama retorts, unimpressed, but seeing Yukito almost take off Rasa's head on her next pass, he decides it's probably about time. Still, he takes his time standing up and heading for the far corner of the building, right above the Kage. It gives Fu plenty of time to gleefully drop 3 more of her and Utakata's sticky oozing glitter bombs on the village ends, ostensibly aiming for Gaara as he tries to corner Roshi. Dodging a sweep of stand, Roshi laughs as it takes out the taggy head man, then jumps over Naruto's chains. There's a very large ball of dripping mud on the end of one of them, cleverly held together with twisted grass, and it whirls past the older man and pulls it short. The mud goes flagging and slams into the face of a familiar shinobi, just turning into the square with a loud squelch. From the direction where Naruto's chains originated, there's a sound of horror, and Kurama grins at Itachi's frozen, wide-eyed figure now dripping thick black mud. Deciding that's enough amusement and collateral damage. For one day, Kurama leaps lightly down from the top of the building and lands a few feet from the Kage, then puts his fingers to his lips the way Sakura used to do when Sasuke and Naruto were being especially annoying, and lets loose an ear-piercing whistle! "Okay, brats," he says, pitched just loud enough to carry. "Back it up. Let's go eat." Instantly, food drops back to the stone, wings fading, and Yukito unlatches herself from the side of the building she was scaling, flipping neatly in the air and landing in a crouch. Han comes to a stop, steadying Karinu with one hand as he grabs Roshi by the back of his robes with the other. Utakata stops, bracing one shoulder against a street lamp as he catches his breath, and Gaara pulls back the curl of sand he just tripped Roshi with. On the other side of the square, Naruto wriggles out from under the cover of a leaning board, but before Kurama can catch more than a glimpse of him, there's a sound of pure fury. "I say, Maki!" A thunders, staggering back upright. "What the heck is this about?" "Tag," Kurama says with a mean smile. "Can't you tell?" Then, dismissing the Kage, he turns counting heads. Everyone managed to keep track of their points. 345. Fu cheers, leaping for Kurama and throwing herself onto his back, then wrapping her arms around his neck. "This was so much fun, Kurama. We have to do it again."
310.
Yugito says, sounding pleased with herself. She lets her claws fade, shaking her fingers out lightly, and smiles up at Karin as the little girl leans over to look down at the others.
What about you, Karin-chan? 233.
Karin pushes her glasses up, her smile shy but happy.
I had fun too.
Han chuckles, patting her knee.
That's the most important part,
He says.
287, I believe. Roshi?
Roshi bats Han's hand away from his collar, then crosses his arms smugly. 300 even. 190 for me? Utakata puts in, faintly abashed. I think I mostly caught the rest of you.
There's a chorus of giggles and small bodies slam into the backs of Kurama's legs, making him stagger.
Watch it, brats.
He complains, steadying Fu as she laughs and trying to turn to see the culprits, but they match him as he turns to stay behind him and he gives a roll of his eyes.
And you too. There's a whispered conference, heated and tense, and the Naruto announces,
Let's!
with a sound of amusement. Han adds,
I took the liberty of keeping track. 312, I believe.
plus 10. Gaara says, quietly insistent.
Yeah, Itachi definitely got caught. Kurama thinks, eyeing the 11-year-old as he gingerly wipes the mud off. There's a slightly guilty giggle from behind Kurama that he can't place, and then small hands tug at Kurama's Haori. Kurama me up!
Naruto insists.
Kurama sighs dramatically, even as small bodies latch onto his arms.
Fine, fine. He huffs and crouches down to scoop them up. At the same moment, Fu laughs and presses her palms over his eyes, and Kurama makes a sound of irritation, pushing to his feet with... Wait. Shaking his head to dislodge Fu's hands, he raises a brow at the 3 small children in his arms. The new addition is familiar enough to make his breath catch, watching him with slightly uncertain dark eyes, but... Naruto is gripping Sasuke's hand, and Sasuke is holding it in return, and it's clear that Sasuke dragged into the game as well, probably at Naruto's insistence. Either my counting skills are worse than I thought, Kurama says, raising a brow at the boy, or you're new.
Roshi is laughing very loudly,
But Kurama sadly doesn't have a hand free to flip him off. I'm Uchiha Sasuke? The kid says, somewhere between solemn and tentative. Naruto and Gaara are my friends.
Well, there's a head start on countering that particular problem, Kurama thinks with amusement.
It's nice to meet you, Sasuke. He answers, good job all 3 of you, and Karin too. You guys are pretty darn sneaky getting that many points.
Naruto beams while Gaara flushes and Karin smirks. Even Sasuke looks very pleased before he leans over Kurama's arm and says,
I'm sorry, Aniki. You were worth a lot of points, though.
Somewhere over Kurama's head, Shisui is laughing so hard he's practically crying.
Itachi brushes off the last of the mud, shoots
Shisui a dark look and turns a smile on Sasuke.
That's all right, he assures his brother. It was a clever trap, Sasuke. Naruto and I made it, Sasuke says proudly, and Gaara was the distraction. With a chuckle, Itachi shakes the traces of dirt from his hands. The 3 of you make a good team. We do, Sasuke says like it's entirely self-evident, then immediately turns back to his new friends when Gaara tugs on his sleeve. Kurama shifts, trying to balance the 3 of them a little more securely, and then hesitates, but... Come on, kid, he tells Itachi a little gruffly. We're all getting dinner, and you 2 idiots get moving already or we'll start without you. There's a brief tussle, and then Tenzo and Shisui are leaping down to join them as well. Shisui drapes himself over Itachi, ruffling his hair, and grins as he sheds scale powder onto the younger Uchiha. Hey, look, we're both victims! How many times did they get you? Once, Itachi says, faintly dry, and eyes Shisui like he might be contagious. I see you weren't quite so successful at dodging? Tenzo snorts, though really, he doesn't look all that much better than Shisui. I wasn't, he says, over the sounds of Shisui's offended protests. Neither of you has any room to talk. Fu's voice is full of cheerful mischief, and she drops from Kurama's back to throw herself at Shisui and climb him even as he flails in a half-hearted attempt to get away. We got you both a bunch of times. Kurama pointedly ignores Sarutobi, attempting to soothe the Kage and village heads as he leads the way out of the square, boosting Naruto up to sit on his shoulders.
Then, unless anyone's hiding points somewhere, I think Fu won. Sweetheart, do you know what you want?
Aerial advantage, Fu says cheerfully over Yukito's huff and Naruto's plaintive cry about lost chances for ramen. Can we have sushi? Yukito perks up at that, giving Fu a shy smile, and she winks back.
It's your choice, Kurama says, amused. I'll put it in order and get some of everything.
Thanks, Kurama-ni.
Fu grins at him, then turns her attention to Shisui as she flaps forward across her arms on top of his head.
You can share mine, Shisui. You're one of the reasons I won, you know. If you were better at dodging, I wouldn't have gotten as many points.
Shisui mutters a curse that gives her the evil eye, but doesn't try to argue.
Sasuke giggles at that, wriggling to be put down.
Kurama pauses to set him on his feet, then holds still as Naruto tumbles after Sasuke, and Gaara hurries to follow the other boys. Do you want to race to that tree? Sasuke asks, pointing ahead.
Yeah!
Naruto agrees brightly.
All the bouncing in place. Yukito-ni, can you be our judge?
Yukito smiles, touching his hair and nodding.
On your mark, get set, go!
Kurama chuckles as the boys bolt forward, stumbling over each other, and tugs lightly on Yukito's braid in wordless thanks. She leans in to the touch, then bounds after the youngest three, passing them easily and landing at the finish line. I'm disappointed, Roshi says, though he's grinning. It's been 5 days, right? And you only picked up another kid just now. No one won the bet. I guess that bad luck is wearing off, Kurama. My luck is fine, Kurama retorts grumbly. Don't make stupid bets in the first place. I'm going to get the food. We'll get them back to the house and washed up.
Utakata volunteers with a smile and grabs Karine when she reaches for him, then lets her slide to the ground. There's a yelp from Shisui as Fu scrambles to follow, flipping right over the Uchiha's head, and in a moment they're both bolting towards the quartet under the tree.
How they have so much energy left, I'll never know,
Han says in wry awe, pulling his hat back on and shaking his head.
I'm ready for a nap. Kurama snorts. They're children, and they're Jinchuriki.
He points out, then raises a hand in a half-hearted waves and turns off down a side street. Kakashi's probably stewed long enough, he thinks, tucking his hands into his sleeves. Time to set his head on straight again. After all, the kiss might have been unexpected, but Kurama definitely didn't mind it. And Kakashi isn't Zabuza, and Kurama isn't on the run, desperately seeking scattered moments of peace to rest and regroup. They're in Konoha now, and hopefully after today, the Kage won't bring up any idiocy about separating them. Kurama's more or less settled, and Kakashi isn't the type for a one-night thing. Kurama's okay with that, he thinks. Kisame isn't overly fond of sitting around, especially when the situation could be considered fairly dire as far as their goal is concerned, and the fact that this Kana Anin has kept him waiting for several days now, doing nothing but kicking around the small room he was led to after his arrival, isn't exactly doing anything to endear him to Kisame. Not that there was much of a chance of that to begin with, given what he is, but still. Kisame is a shinobi, and he gets it. Sudden disappearances in the midst of a normal schedule are suspicious, and they're best served trying to avoid that kind of thing. He can wait, if he has to, especially since it seems like Konoha isn't making any move beyond fortifying its defenses. He was only just able to sneak in via the Nakano River before the barrier went up, which was cutting things just a little too close for comfort, but it doesn't look like they're mobilizing. Flipping a kunai from hand to hand, he wonders not quite idly if Sasori managed to get that seal off of Obito. The former Sunanin is skilled with seals. That's a good half of what puppetry is, as far as Kasame's been able to figure out. But he's not an Uzumaki. He's not Uzumaki Kushina, more to the point, because Kasame remembers hearing stories about her in the war. That she was the Kyuubi Jinchuriki was almost an afterthought compared to her ninjutsu and her seals, the way she used a sword. Namikaze Minato might have been Konoha's hero of the Third Shinobi War, but Kushina was one of its pillars. Kasame doesn't like sitting here not knowing anything. Obito could be dead, or on the verge of it, and while Kasame has more faith in his fortitude than to consider that as the first option, it's been a long few days without any way to contact the outside world. Chuckling faintly at himself, because really, look at him, a few short weeks of actually feeling like he has a comrade again, and he's getting all goopy.
Kasame flips his kunai up, counts how many times it spins before he has to catch it, and then repeats the motion. You should have been one of the heroes of Kiri, Kasame. The remembered echo makes him pause, studying the blank stone of the wall beside the door. It tears another chuckle from his throat, but this one is faintly bitter, touched with an old regret that Kasame doesn't usually allow himself to feel. What would have happened if he'd stayed in Kiri, never joined the Cypher Squad, never had to kill Fuguki? He'd been loyal but never overly ambitious, powerful but content in his place. It's possible that Saindame could have picked him as a successor, assuming Kiri hadn't had another of its frequent civil spats. The Kage seat is pretty much every powerful shinobi's dream, and as a child, Kasame felt the same. Being one of the 7 swordsmen was enough, but he'd probably have gotten bored of that eventually, discontent. Probably would have risen in rank, if only for something to do. Kasame's good at following orders, but it's hardly his only skill. He tries to picture it for a moment. A world where truth is already a common thing, where shinobi don't betray their friends. Imagine a world where things are better, easier, and maybe he'd have met an Uchiha boy with knife-sharp eyes somewhere along the way. Obito's the one who gave him a purpose after all, who rescued him as he drowned in betrayal and lies and the murky darkness that shouldn't exist even in a shinobi's world. That doesn't seem like the kind of connection that would change, regardless of how the world reshaped itself. The thought comes with its own dose of regret. There's been a shared unspoken understanding right from the very first that Obito and Kasame aren't going to be a part of the world they're working to create. Either they'll sacrifice themselves to bring it into existence, or they'll die at its hands afterward. No matter how it happens, though, there isn't going to be space for people like them in it. Maybe, if they're lucky, they'll get to see it, but Kasame has no illusions that people will thank them for stripping the falsehoods from the world. Eventually, people will be happier, the world will be better, but at first, no one is going to adjust well. Kasame's assassinated enough daimyos and leaders spilling their lies to know that people like that will always default to dishonesty if they're given the option, or if they think it will benefit them. And without those people, with everyone's dreams within reach, chaos will give way to peace, to truth. And even if Kasame isn't there to see it happen, he's absolutely certain it will be beautiful. Someone knocks on the door, brisk but polite, and Kasame rises to his feet, catching the kunai in one hand as he slings Samehara over his shoulder with the other. "Yeah?" he asks cheerfully, and the room is small enough that he barely needs to take 2 strides to pull the door open. There's a young woman in a black and red jacket and blank mask standing there, and she bows to him. "If you would come with me, sir?" The deference is amusing enough to make Kasame chuckle, but he follows the girl as she heads down the tunnel. They're deep underground, but Kasame can feel that there's running water close by and marks its location carefully in case he ends up needing an escape route. People tend to assume the only way out in this kind of situation is up, but Kasame knows better. 4 long corridors east and 2 shorter ones north, and the escort stops in front of an open archway and bows again. With a friendly wave, Kasame wanders through, hiding his careful sweep of the bare-shadowed room behind a casual stretch. There's a man waiting for him in the center, leaning on his cane beneath a skylight shadowed by trees. "Shimura," Kasame says cheerfully. "Finally managed to shake your tails."
Danzo doesn't look impressed by his friendliness. "There have been several minor disturbances that required my attention. Your message said you had a request to make of me."
"More like a deal." Kasame chuckles, rubbing his fingers over Samehara's hilt. "I've heard there are a couple of Jinchuriki running around your village. Wouldn't it be a shame if the other villages just misplaced theirs?" The old man's attention sharpens even as his mouth pulls into a frown.
"You will leave Konoha defenseless as well, Hoshigaki. Your master wishes to have all 9 lead you to himself."
Kasame waves that off. "We need them all together to activate a ritual. Afterwards, you can get any of them you want." Not that he lived long enough to appreciate it, but it's technically not a lie, and besides, Kasame feels no guilt lying to a traitor. There's suspicion in Danzo's face, but also the faintest stirrings of greed.
"Sarutobi likely suspects me of undermining him.
he says flatly.
Getting close to the Jinchuriki would be next to impossible, especially given Uzumaki Kurama's presence.
With a low, rumbling laugh, Kasame pats Samahara fondly. I don't need all the Jinchuriki, he says easily. Just Kurama.
Danzo's expression pulls into a grim smile, but at the same moment there's a soft sound from the shadows.
It's barely more than an indrawn breath, and if he hadn't spent the last handful of days in what was practically solitary confinement, Kasame would have missed it entirely. Danzo seems to have, because he startles back when Kasame turns suddenly, 3 kunai already in the air. The darkness shifts, breaks, and a black-clad figure in a tiger-painted mask dives out of the way of Kasame's throw, rolling back to his feet in a quick, smooth motion that sends brown hair swaying.
Well, well,
Danzo says darkly, and his cane taps against the stone as he steps forward.
You've found a rat, and a familiar one I see. You made off with 2 of my recruits, child.
The only answer is a low curse, and the Anbu dodges sideways like he's going to bolt for the door. Kasame is already moving, though, one hand flashing into the snake seal. He takes a breath, chakra surging, and lets it go as a tidal wave that pours from his mouth and races towards the intruder, swamping him even as he tries to cry out. At the same moment, something pricks Kasame's skin, and he looks down to find 3 senbon clustered with impressive accuracy right over his heart, stabbing through his Akatsuki robes. The water recedes like the tide going out, sweeping away, and the tiger-masked Anbu tumbles from the wall where it pinned him to land on his hands and knees, coughing desperately. He gets his feet under him with impressive speed, staggering mostly upright even as he tries to catch his breath, and there are more senbon in his hands. Kasame can see the flicker of satisfaction in his body language when he realizes his senbon hit, and Kasame laughs, slow and amused, and reaches up to tug the 3 needles out of his skin. Poisoned, he assumes, since the Anbu didn't throw them with enough force to actually pierce his heart. It's a bit of a shame on the stranger's part, because that was truly fantastic accuracy, and while poison might not be enough to so much as dent Kasame's strength, a senbon through the heart probably would have done it. At the very least, it would have made things more interesting. I've been itching for a good fight, Kasame says cheerfully, letting the senbon fall through his fingers to disappear into the ankle-deep water covering the cavern. Puta bastago, alright? I'm burned and I want to have some fun before I kill you. The Anbu is staring at him, frozen with disbelief, and Kasame chuckles, bringing Samahara around. Come on, he offers. I'll even let you have the first move. It's only fair, right? Since you're going to die anyway. Finally, the man moves. He takes a breath, squares his shoulders, and pulls a length of ninja wire out of his weapons pouch. You're not going to kill me? He says, and it's quiet, but determined. Trust me! You're the pawn of a traitor, and you don't want to mess with a Kanaha shinobi. He's so very wrong that Kasame can't help but laugh, no matter how angry it makes him to be called a traitor, even indirectly. I guess we'll see, he says lightly, and feels Samahara stir, hungry and eager. Time to feed, Kasame tells the sword and brings it around in a sweeping slash.